Do you ever wonder what soldiers actually ate during the Civil War? From hardtack to corned beef hash, the meals were simple, practical, and made to last through long marches and harsh campaigns. These 30 dishes tell a story of survival, ingenuity, and the small comforts that kept men going in difficult times. Let's step back into the camps and discover the food that fueled an army and shaped daily life on the front lines. Hardtack. In the midst of a Civil War camp, few foods were as infamous or as essential as hardtack. These dense, dry biscuits, often described by soldiers as edible wood, were the backbone of a soldier's diet. Born out of necessity, hardtack was simple, inexpensive, and durable, able to survive long marches and harsh conditions without spoiling. Flour, water, and a pinch of salt were all it took to create this unassuming staple, yet its humble ingredients belied the resilience it offered. Preparation was straightforward. The dough was mixed, rolled thin, cut into squares, and baked until rock hard. Some regiments tried to soften it by soaking it in water, coffee, or even soup, giving rise to countless creative improvisations. Soldiers learned quickly that a little imagination was required to make it palatable. Some dunked it in beans, fried it in bacon grease, or used it to thicken stews. Each bite, though often hard on the teeth, carried a strange comfort, a reminder of sustenance in uncertain times. Hardtack was more than a simple ration. It was a symbol of endurance. Soldiers wrote home about it in letters, joking about its toughness, or swapping stories of who could bite it first without losing a tooth. Around campfires, hardtack became a shared experience, connecting men from different regions through a common struggle. It was also a practical measure. When fresh bread was impossible, hardtack provided essential calories and energy, allowing soldiers to march, drill, and fight with some measure of physical strength. Officers and cooks would carefully ration it, sometimes breaking it into smaller pieces to make it last longer, while soldiers developed clever ways to incorporate it into soups, stews, and porridges, turning a basic biscuit into multiple meals. Today, hardtack might seem archaic or even cruel to modern palates, accustomed to fresh bread and soft pastries, yet it holds historical significance. It reminds us of the ingenuity and resilience required to survive wartime scarcity. While we now have instant noodles, protein bars, and carefully packaged rations, hardtack stands as a testament to the simple, enduring foods that sustained generations under extraordinary circumstances. Its legacy endures not just as a curiosity, but as a symbol of resourcefulness, endurance, and the unassuming power of basic sustenance. Salt pork and beans. In the dusty, crowded camps of the Civil War, salt pork and beans were a lifeline, a simple meal that could sustain soldiers through long marches and bitter winters. Salt pork, heavily cured and often fatty, paired with dried beans, created a protein-rich dish that was filling, inexpensive, and easy to store for months at a time. It wasn't gourmet by any means, but it was reliable, a warm, hearty combination that soldiers came to know intimately. The preparation was straightforward but required patience. Beans were soaked overnight, then simmered slowly with chunks of salt pork, sometimes with the addition of onions, molasses, or pepper when available. The process wasn't glamorous. A campfire or iron pot over a tripod was the kitchen, and the smell of cooking fat mingled with the smoke of fires and the chatter of men. Despite its simplicity, the dish offered comfort. It was warm, filling, and shared among comrades, giving soldiers a rare sense of homeliness in an otherwise harsh environment. Salt pork and beans also had a practical side. It could be cooked in large batches and stored for hours or even days, making it ideal for feeding regiments on the move. Soldiers quickly learned to make it stretch, adding foraged vegetables, soaking hardtack to thicken the beans, or rationing portions carefully to ensure everyone had enough. The dish became a canvas notice for small acts of creativity and adaptability, reflecting the ingenuity soldiers needed to survive. Letters home often mentions salt pork and beans, not as a delicacy, but as a constant, a dependable companion in the daily grind of soldier life. Some complained about the saltiness or the monotony, yet the dish also inspired resourcefulness. Soldiers learned to stretch rations, add foraged greens, or combine it with hardtack to stave off hunger. Around the fire, sharing a pot of beans fostered camaraderie, conversation, and occasional humor as men teased each other about overcooked beans or who got the fattest piece of pork. Today, salt pork and beans might seem rustic or even unappealing, overshadowed by modern convenience foods. Yet it serves as a reminder of how necessity shaped taste and practice in the past. Its enduring legacy is not just as sustenance, but as a testament to frugality, practicality, and the quiet moments of camaraderie around a shared pot, an unpretentious dish that nourished both body and morale in the most trying of times. Coffee substitute, chicory coffee. For soldiers in Civil War camps, the daily cup of coffee was more than a morning ritual. It was a small anchor of normalcy in a chaotic, often brutal routine. But real coffee was a luxury that wasn't always available, and when supplies ran low, ingenuity stepped in. Enter chicory coffee, a bitter yet comforting substitute made from roasted ground chicory root. It wasn't quite the same as the rich brew from home kitchens, but it was warm, caffeinated adjacent, and just enough to lift spirits during cold mornings or long nights on sentry duty. Preparation was surprisingly simple. Soldiers or camp cooks would roast the chopped chicory root over an open flame until it was dark and fragrant, then grind it into a coarse powder. The grounds were steeped in boiling water, often mixed with a small amount of whatever real coffee remained, or drunk on their own. Sweeteners were scarce, so many drank it black or with a hint of molasses if available. Despite its humble taste, the act of brewing and sharing a cup carried weight. It brought a moment of ritual and human connection, a brief comfort in the otherwise harsh reality of army life. Letters from the front lines often mention the curious bitterness of chicory coffee, sometimes with humor, sometimes with frustration. Yet the substitute became part of camp life, a symbol of resilience and adaptation. Soldiers learned to appreciate what they had, even when it wasn't perfect. In a modern context, chicory coffee might seem strange, but it lives on in parts of New Orleans and among those seeking caffeine alternatives. For Civil War soldiers, it wasn't just a beverage, it was a lifeline, a reminder of home and a testament to resourcefulness under scarcity. Today, it invites reflection on how simple ingredients, creativity, and necessity once shaped the daily rituals of survival and camaraderie in army camps. Cornmeal mush. In the early morning hours of a Civil War camp, before the sun had fully pierced the mist, the smell of cornmeal mush often filled the air. This simple dish, made from ground cornmeal and water or milk, was a staple for soldiers seeking a warm, filling start to the day. It required little more than a pot, a fire, and patience, yet it offered sustenance that could fuel long marches and grueling labor. Its humble origins in frontier and southern cooking made it ideal for the army, where supplies were limited and practicality was everything. Preparing cornmeal mush was straightforward but demanded careful attention. Cornmeal was slowly whisked into boiling water or milk, stirred constantly to prevent lumps, and cooked until thick and smooth. Some soldiers added a pinch of salt or a dash of sugar if available, while others, in more resourceful moments, topped it with bacon drippings or molasses for flavor. Once cooked, it could be eaten immediately as a soft, porridge-like meal or allowed to cool and firm, then sliced and fried over the campfire for a more satisfying texture. Each variation reflected the creativity and resilience of soldiers making the most of meager ingredients. Cornmeal mush was also practical in its versatility. It could be cooked in large batches and eaten over several meals, making it ideal for regiments on the move. Soldiers would often use leftovers creatively, combining cooled slices with other rations like salted meat or beans, turning a simple breakfast into a hearty lunch or supper. Around campfires, sharing cornmeal mush fostered camaraderie. As men swapped tips, traded small additions like molasses, and reminisced about the kitchens they had left behind. Letters often mention the dish, not for its extravagance, but for its reliable warmth and familiarity, a small taste of domestic life amid the chaos of war. Today, cornmeal mush might seem quaint or plain, but its legacy is enduring. It reminds us that sustenance does not need to be elaborate to be meaningful. In the hands of resourceful cooks, it nourished bodies, boosted morale, and created fleeting moments of shared comfort. A quiet testament to the ingenuity and resilience of soldiers who faced daily uncertainty with whatever they had at hand. Its simplicity was its strength, proving that even the humblest ingredients could provide nourishment, energy, and a sense of home the harshest conditions. Army coffee and sugar rations. In the camps of the Civil War, few comforts rivaled a steaming cup of coffee, and for soldiers, the arrival of coffee and sugar rations was a small but powerful morale boost. Coffee was not just a drink, it was a ritual, a moment of normalcy in the harsh and unpredictable life of a soldier. The rations themselves were modest, often a few ounces of roasted coffee beans or ground coffee paired with sugar, but they carried enormous significance. In a world dominated by hardtack and salted meat, this simple combination was a daily luxury, a reminder of home kitchens left behind. Preparation demanded both patience and ingenuity. Soldiers would crush or grind the beans over campfires, carefully boiling the grounds in kettles. When water was scarce or hard to heat, some improvised by soaking the coffee in cold water to extract flavor, though the result was never quite the same. Sugar, carefully rationed, was often stirred into the brew, transforming a bitter beverage into a sweet pick-me-up that could sustain energy through long marches or frigid guard duty. The process became communal. Men would gather around fires, sharing stories as the coffee brewed, exchanging tips, and sometimes even trading portions with neighbors. The letters soldiers sent home often referenced these rations with a mixture of gratitude and humor. They joked about stretching sugar cubes, sneaking extra coffee, or the occasional disappointment when rations ran low. Yet, beyond the practical energy boost, the ritual of coffee reinforced bonds among soldiers, offering comfort and a fleeting sense of domestic life amidst the chaos of war. In today's world, where a cup of coffee is often taken for granted, Army coffee and sugar rations remind us of the enduring human need for small comforts. They highlight resilience, creativity, and the simple pleasures that sustain both body and spirit. Even now, thinking of a soldier carefully stirring a rationed cup over a smoky campfire invites reflection on how something as ordinary as coffee can become extraordinary in times of scarcity. Dried beef and bread. In the rough-and-ready camps of the Civil War, dried beef and bread were among the most common meals, a combination born of necessity and practicality. Dried beef, sometimes called jerked or salted beef, was preserved to last weeks or even months, making it ideal for soldiers on long campaigns. Bread, whether freshly baked when available or a substitute like hardtack, provided the necessary carbohydrate to balance the protein-rich meat. Together, they formed a simple, portable meal that could be eaten cold on the march or warmed over a fire when time allowed. Preparation was minimal but essential. Dried beef could be eaten as is, sliced thin to soften with a bit of chewing, or boiled in water to make it more tender. Bread, often dense, coarse, and occasionally stale, served as both plate and accompaniment. Soldiers learned to improvise, soaking bread in water, coffee, or soup to make it edible, or frying slices with a little fat from salt pork when available. These modest adaptations turned a utilitarian ration into something more comforting, a small taste of home amid the rigors of camp life. Dried beef and bread carried more than sustenance. They were a symbol of shared experience. Letters from the front frequently mentioned swapping slices with a comrade, trading pieces for a treat, or joking about the toughness of the bread. Around campfires, these meals were eaten in quiet conversation or during hurried bites between drills, creating moments of camaraderie in a world dominated by uncertainty. Today, dried beef and bread may seem plain, even austere, compared to modern conveniences, yet they speak volumes about resilience, frugality, and the improvisational skills of soldiers. In every tough bite, there was nourishment, both physical and emotional, a reminder that even even the simplest meals can sustain morale and forge connections. It is a testament to the resourcefulness and endurance that defined daily life in Civil War camps. Pickled vegetables. In the camps of the Civil War, fresh vegetables were a rare luxury, vulnerable to spoilage during long marches and in the heat of summer. Pickled vegetables, however, offered a clever and practical solution. Soldiers and camp cooks relied on the preservation of cucumbers, cabbage, onions, and other readily available produce, submerged in brine or vinegar to extend their shelf life. These tangy, acidic bites not only provided essential nutrients in a monotonous diet of hardtack and salted meat, but also added a welcome burst of flavor to otherwise heavy, bland meals. The process of preparing pickled vegetables was simple but transformative. Vegetables were sliced, salted, and packed tightly into barrels or jars before being covered with a vinegar solution. Over time, the brine worked its magic, tenderizing the vegetables and infusing them with a sharp, distinctive taste. For soldiers, opening a jar of pickles or sauerkraut could feel like discovering treasure, an invigorating change to the daily rations of beans, bread, and salted pork. Even in the field, soldiers became adept at improvising with limited ingredients, sometimes pickling wild greens, onions, or even cabbage leaves for a touch of freshness in their meals. Some inventive cooks added a dash of sugar, herbs, or spices to balance the acidity, turning a practical preservation method into a more flavorful, morale-boosting dish. Pickled vegetables were more than sustenance. They were a small comfort, a reminder of home gardens and family kitchens left behind. Letters often mention the joy of receiving pickled treats in care packages, or sharing them around a fire, a tangy reprieve that brightened the monotony of camp life. Around the camp, men would trade jars, exchange tips for better pickling, or simply savor the occasional crisp bite while recalling familiar meals from home. They were a portable taste of domestic life, a rare indulgence that carried both nutrition and emotional resonance. Today, pickled vegetables remain a testament to resourcefulness and preservation techniques that predated refrigeration. In Civil War camps, they nourished both body and spirit, offering soldiers a flavorful connection to home and a reminder that even in scarcity, creativity and practicality could turn humble ingredients into moments of enduring comfort. Their legacy endures not only in culinary tradition, but as a symbol of adaptability and the enduring human desire for taste, health, and a small piece of normalcy in challenging times. Bean soup. Bean soup was a cornerstone of the Civil War soldiers' diet, a humble yet hearty dish that provided sustenance, warmth, and a sense of comfort amidst the harsh realities of camp life. Dried beans were inexpensive, portable, and nutritious, making them ideal for long campaigns where fresh ingredients were scarce. Combined with water, salt pork, and the occasional foraged herb or onion, bean soup became a reliable meal, simmered slowly over a campfire or in iron kettles, filling the air with a smell that was as reassuring as it was practical. Preparing the soup required patience and care. Beans had to be soaked when possible, then boiled slowly until tender. Salt pork or leftover meat added flavor and protein, while small additions like molasses, wild greens, or dried vegetables were often used to stretch the rations further. The process was simple, yet it demanded attention, as the long simmering allowed flavors to meld and created a dish that could warm both body and spirit. Soldiers learned to improvise, sometimes thickening the soup with crumbled hardtack or using it to soak bread, transforming basic rations into a more satisfying meal. Bean soup carried more than nutrition. It carried stories. Around campfires, soldiers would ladle steaming bowls and share laughter, letters, and memories. The dish became a shared experience, a small anchor of routine and community in an unpredictable world. Mentions of bean soup frequently appear in correspondence' home, sometimes with humor about its monotony, sometimes with gratitude for its sustenance. Today, bean soup might seem plain to modern palates accustomed to convenience and variety, yet it remains a symbol of resilience, creativity, and comfort. In Civil War camps, it was more than food. It was a testament to resourcefulness, an expression of camaraderie, and a warm, nourishing reprieve from the hardships of wartime life. Simple, sustaining, and endlessly adaptable, bean soup reminds us that even the most modest dishes mix can hold profound significance in both history and memory. Pemmican-style meat mix. In the grueling environment of Civil War camps, soldiers needed food that could endure long marches, harsh weather, and the unpredictability of supply lines. Pemmican-style meat mix became a practical solution, dense, calorie-rich, and long-lasting. Inspired by Native American preservation methods, it combined dried or salted meat with rendered fat and sometimes ground grains or dried fruit. This compact mixture offered concentrated energy, sustaining soldiers during forced marches or extended periods away from fresh rations, and it was light enough to carry without spoiling. The preparation of pemmican-style meat mix required foresight and ingenuity. Meat was carefully dried or smoked until almost brittle, then shredded or pounded into small pieces. Rendered fat was mixed in, binding the protein into a cohesive, shelf-stable substance. When available, dried berries or a bit of flour could be added, improving flavor and texture. The resulting mixture was dense, chewy, and admittedly odd-tasting to the unaccustomed palate, but it packed an astonishing amount of nutrition into a small package. Soldiers could eat it cold on the march or soften it over a fire to create a hot meal when time and supplies allowed. Pemmican-style meat mix was more than sustenance, it was a lifeline. Letters from the front often mention its practicality, with soldiers praising its ability to stave off hunger during long marches and rough campaigns. Around campfires, the mix was shared, rationed carefully, and occasionally seasoned with a bit of humor as soldiers adapted to its unique texture and taste. Today, pemmican-style meat mix may seem extreme compared to modern snack bars or ready-to-eat meals, but it embodies the resourcefulness and resilience of soldiers in the field. It is a testament to human ingenuity under duress, transforming simple ingredients into a sustaining force that carried men through the daily hardships of war. In every bite, there was endurance, energy, and a quiet reminder that survival often demanded creativity as much as courage. Johnny cakes, cornmeal cakes. In the bustling, smoky camps of the Civil War, Johnny cakes, simple cornmeal cakes, offered soldiers a warm, satisfying breakfast that was both easy to prepare and filling enough to fuel a long day of marches or labor. Born from early American and Southern culinary traditions, these cakes were a staple for armies that needed food that could be cooked quickly over a fire and consumed immediately or saved for later. With only cornmeal, water, salt, and a bit of fat or lard when available, Johnny cakes were a humble creation that exemplified frugality and practicality. Preparation was straightforward but required attention over a campfire. The cornmeal was mixed with water to form a thick batter, sometimes enriched with a little salt or rendered fat, then poured or shaped into flat rounds. Placed carefully on a hot skillet or directly on a clean, greased surface over the fire, they cooked until golden and firm enough to hold together. Some soldiers would enjoy them plain, while others experimented, soaking them in coffee, topping them with a spoonful of molasses, or frying them in leftover grease from salt pork to add flavor and calories. Each variation was a testament to the adaptability and resourcefulness demanded by life in the field. Johnny cakes were more than a simple meal. They were a source of comfort. In letters home, soldiers often mentioned them with fondness, recalling the small pleasures of a hot breakfast and the camaraderie of sharing them around a campfire. Despite their simplicity, the cakes created a sense of normalcy, a link to home kitchens and family tables left behind. Today, Johnny cakes might seem rustic or quaint, overshadowed by modern breakfast options, yet they endure as a symbol of resilience, ingenuity, and sustenance. In Civil War camps, they nourished bodies and spirits alike, reminding us that even the simplest, most modest foods can carry profound significance in times of hardship and uncertainty. Molasses cookies. In the harsh, often monotonous life of a Civil War camp, molasses cookies were a rare and welcome indulgence. Soldiers lived on rations that were simple, repetitive, and sometimes difficult to stomach, so a sweet treat like a molasses cookie offered a small, comforting taste of home. Dark, chewy, and lightly spiced, these cookies were made from pantry staples: flour, sugar, or molasses, a bit of fat, and occasionally a pinch of cinnamon or cloves if available. Simple as they were, they provided warmth, energy, and a reminder of kitchens left behind. The preparation of molasses cookies in camp was modest but inventive. primitive. With limited utensils and heat sources, soldiers or camp cooks would mix the ingredients into a thick dough, shape it into small rounds, and bake them over a fire or in a makeshift oven if available. Some soldiers improvised by flattening the dough on greased tins, using cast iron skillets, or even hot stones to bake the cookies evenly. The aroma of sweet molasses and spices wafting through the camp offered an unexpected morale boost, stirring fond memories of home kitchens, family gatherings, and more leisurely times. For many, these cookies were more than sustenance. They were a brief reprieve from the harsh realities of soldiering, a small pleasure that could brighten an otherwise difficult day. Molasses cookies also became a vehicle for camaraderie and creativity. Men would experiment with the dough, adding small amounts of foraged ingredients, leftover dried fruit, or nuts to enhance flavor. They shared portions with fellow soldiers, traded recipes, or hid cookies for later enjoyment. Letters from the front often mention the delight and connection sparked by these small treats, highlighting how a simple cookie could foster morale, community, and a sense of home. Today, molasses cookies might seem simple, even plain, compared to modern desserts, but in Civil War camps, they were treasured. They remind us that even in scarcity, small indulgences matter, that warmth and sweetness can be found in the simplest of ingredients, and that human ingenuity and the desire for comfort endure, no matter how difficult the circumstances. These cookies exemplify how resourcefulness, creativity, and a touch of sweetness could sustain both body and spirit in the hardest of times. Sop coffee, bread or grain coffee. In the makeshift kitchens of Civil War camps, real coffee was often scarce, forcing soldiers to turn to inventive substitutes. Sop coffee, made from roasted bread, grains, or even corn, became a practical solution. It wasn't the rich, aromatic brew many soldiers remembered from home, but it offered warmth, a familiar routine, and a hint of comfort in an otherwise demanding environment. This inventive drink reflected the resourcefulness required to survive when supplies were limited and demonstrated the creativity soldiers employed to maintain a sense of normalcy. Preparation was straightforward yet required some ingenuity. Stale bread, broken into pieces, or grains like corn or rye were roasted over a fire until dark and fragrant, then ground or crushed into coarse particles. These grounds were steeped in boiling water to create a dark, bitter liquid that could mimic coffee's effect, especially when sugar or a small amount of real coffee could be added. Soldiers often drank it black, appreciating its warmth and the brief energy boost it provided, or used it to soak hardtack, creating a porridge-like breakfast that made the tough ration more palatable. Sop coffee was more than just a beverage. It was a shared experience in camp life. Soldiers would gather around fires, exchanging techniques, grumbling about its bitterness, or laughing at attempts to stretch the limited coffee rations. Letters home often mention sop coffee with a mix of humor and resignation, acknowledging its shortcomings while appreciating the ingenuity that made it possible. Today, sop coffee might seem unappealing, a far cry from our morning lattes and espresso shots, yet it represents adaptability and resilience. In Civil War camps, it nourished both body and morale, a testament to the creativity and perseverance that sustained soldiers through long campaigns, harsh conditions, and endless uncertainty. Even in scarcity, warmth, routine, and ingenuity prevailed, one bitter cup at a time. Rice and salt pork stew. In the camps of the Civil War, rice and salt pork stew was a practical, hearty meal that sustained soldiers through long marches and chilly nights. Salt pork, heavily cured and fatty, provided essential protein and calories, while rice offered a cheap, filling starch that could stretch the meal to feed many men. Simple, shelf-stable ingredients like these were invaluable in an army constantly on the move, where fresh provisions were scarce and spoilage was a constant concern. Despite its humble nature, nature, the stew became a staple in camp kitchens, providing warmth, nourishment, and a semblance of comfort in an otherwise harsh environment. Preparation was straightforward but required patience over a campfire. Chunks of salt pork were slowly cooked to render fat, which was then used to saute onions or any vegetables foraged nearby. Rice was added along with water or broth, simmering until tender and infused with the rich, savory flavors of the pork. Soldiers often improvised, adding leftover beans, spices, or even crumbled hardtack to thicken the stew and make it more filling. The long simmering process not only enhanced flavor but also created a sense of ritual as men gathered around kettles waiting for the warm, fragrant meal. Beyond its practical role, rice and salt pork stew carried emotional weight. It was a dish shared among comrades, eaten in the glow of campfires while stories were swapped, and moments of levity were stolen amidst the rigors of army life. Letters home sometimes describe it with a mix of gratitude and humor, reflecting both its sustenance and the camaraderie it fostered. Today, the dish may seem rustic or austere compared to modern comfort foods, yet it endures as a symbol of resilience and ingenuity. Rice and salt pork stew reminds us that sustenance in adversity can nourish more than just the body. It feeds morale, fosters connection, and transforms simple ingredients into moments of shared comfort and endurance. Boiled potatoes with bacon drippings. In the camps of the Civil War, boiled potatoes with bacon drippings were a simple yet comforting staple, providing warmth, sustenance, and a touch of flavor in an otherwise Spartan diet. Potatoes were cheap, durable, and easy to transport, while bacon, preserved through salt curing, added fat and a rich, savory taste. Together, they created a meal that was filling, portable, and easy to prepare over a campfire, making it ideal for soldiers enduring long marches, cold nights, or scarce rations. The preparation was straightforward but practical. Potatoes were peeled when possible, then boiled in kettles or iron pots until tender. While the potatoes cooked, salt-cured bacon was sliced and rendered over the fire, producing drippings that were poured over the cooked potatoes, adding flavor and extra calories. In times of scarcity, soldiers would sometimes mix the drippings with a little water or broth to stretch the fat further, ensuring every bite was satisfying. The combination of soft, starchy potatoes and savory, smoky drippings created a simple pleasure, a modest taste of home in the middle of camp life. Beyond its practicality, the dish carried emotional resonance. Around the fire, soldiers shared bowls, swapped stories, and joked about who got the fattest piece of bacon. Letters from the front often mention this humble meal with fondness, highlighting the comfort it provided and the small moments of normalcy it created. The act of preparing and eating boiled potatoes with bacon drippings became a ritual of camaraderie and survival, a shared experience that reinforced bonds among men far from home. Today, this dish may seem modest, overshadowed by modern culinary conveniences, but it embodies the ingenuity and adaptability of soldiers in the field. Boiled potatoes with bacon drippings were more than nourishment. They were warmth, comfort, and a reminder that even the simplest ingredients can sustain both body and spirit in difficult times. Apple or dried fruit compote. In the dusty, makeshift kitchens of Civil War camps, apple or dried fruit compote offered soldiers a rare taste of sweetness and a reminder of home. Fresh fruit was a luxury that often spoiled before it could reach the front lines, so preserved options like dried apples, peaches, or raisins became a practical solution. When combined with a little water, sugar if available, and occasionally a pinch of spice, these fruits transformed into a warm, flavorful compote that could be eaten on its own or served alongside other rations. It was simple, nourishing, and provided a morale boost in the monotonous diet of hardtack, salt pork, and beans. Preparation was modest, yet required care. Dried fruit was simmered slowly over a campfire in water until Soldiers often added sugar, molasses, or a touch of leftover cooking fat to enhance flavor, and those with access to fresh apples would peel and slice them before cooking to create a slightly tangy variation. The resulting compote was a thick, fragrant mixture, easy to portion and share, offering both energy and a sweet reprieve from the bland staples of daily camp life. Beyond its nutritional value, the compote carried emotional weight. Around campfires, soldiers would ladle the warm fruit into tin cups or onto slices of bread, sharing it with comrades while recounting stories from home or trading jokes to pass the long hours. Letters frequently mention the small joys of receiving fruit from care packages, and compote became a symbol of comfort, reminding men of kitchens and orchards left behind. Today, apple or dried fruit compote may seem humble, yet it embodies resourcefulness, adaptability, and the importance of small pleasures. In Civil War camps, it provided not just nourishment, but a taste of normalcy, a touch of sweetness in difficult times, and a reminder that even simple ingredients, when treated with care and imagination, could lift both spirits and morale. Corn pone.
And y'all, let me tell you, I found Dolly Parton's recipe for corn pone.
Corn pone was a staple in the diet of many soldiers during the Civil War, particularly in Confederate camps where cornmeal was abundant and inexpensive. This simple, dense bread, made from cornmeal, water, or milk, and a bit of fat, provided a filling, portable, and durable food that could be cooked over an open fire. Its simplicity made it ideal for soldiers on the move, requiring minimal ingredients and offering a reliable source of sustenance during long campaigns and scarce supply situations. Preparation of corn pone was straightforward yet practical. Cornmeal was mixed with water or milk to form a stiff batter, sometimes enriched with a little salt or bacon drippings for flavor. The mixture was then shaped into small rounds or oblong loaves and placed directly in the embers of a fire or in a greased skillet until golden brown. The result was a slightly crumbly, earthy bread with a subtle sweetness and hearty texture that could be eaten alone or used to soak up stews, soups, or bacon drippings. Soldiers often developed personal variations, adding leftover bits of fat, molasses, or even foraged herbs to enhance flavor and stretch their rations further. Beyond its practicality, corn pone held emotional and cultural significance. It was a familiar taste of home for many soldiers, evoking family kitchens and Southern traditions. Around campfires, sharing corn pone could foster camaraderie, offering a small moment of comfort and normalcy in the otherwise harsh and uncertain life of a soldier. Letters from the front often mention it with a mix of appreciation and humor, revealing its role not just as food, but as a symbol of endurance and ingenuity. Today, corn pone might seem humble compared to modern bread, yet its legacy endures as a testament to resourcefulness, simplicity, and the comforting power of familiar flavors. In Civil War camps, it nourished both body and spirit, proving that even the most basic ingredients could sustain soldiers through the trials of war. Hardtack porridge. In the camps
So today I'm going to be tackling hardtack, the staple of many wars.
In the camps of the Civil War, soldiers often faced long days with limited and monotonous rations, and hardtack porridge became an inventive way to make their staple biscuits more edible and satisfying. Hardtack, notoriously dry and dense, was a durable ration designed to survive long marches and rough handling, but on its own, it could be a challenge to chew. Transforming it into a porridge not only softened the biscuit, but also created a warm, filling meal that could sustain soldiers through early mornings, long marches, or frigid nights around the campfire. The preparation was simple, yet required patience. Hardtack was broken or crushed into smaller pieces and soaked in water or thin broth until it softened, forming a thick, porridge-like consistency. If available, soldiers added a pinch of salt, a little sugar, or a dash of fat from salt pork to enhance flavor. The mixture was then simmered over a fire, stirred occasionally, and eaten hot, providing both calories and warmth. This method allowed soldiers to stretch a limited ration, making a small supply of hardtack feed more men and last longer during supply shortages. Hardtack porridge was more than just sustenance, it carried emotional and social significance. Around the campfire, soldiers shared the hot, mushy meal, exchanging tips on improving flavor or swapping small additions from their rations. Letters from the front often mention it with humor, frustration, and sometimes even pride, highlighting the resourcefulness required to turn a notoriously bland biscuit into something nourishing and edible. Today, hardtack porridge may seem primitive compared to modern breakfasts, yet it is a testament to resilience and creativity under duress. In Civil War camps, it provided warmth, nourishment, and a moment of shared comfort, proving that even the most austere ingredients could be transformed into sustenance, capable of supporting both body and spirit. Sawdust bread. Sawdust bread is one of the more extreme examples of the improvisation and resourcefulness required in Civil War camps, reflecting the severe scarcity soldiers sometimes faced. In moments of extreme shortage, traditional ingredients like flour were often unavailable, or in such limited supply that cooks were forced to experiment with unconventional fillers, including sawdust. While it might sound unappetizing or even hazardous to modern readers, it was a desperate measure aimed at stretching rations to feed hungry troops. This bread was never meant to be flavorful. Its purpose was survival, a way to stave off starvation when options were few. The preparation of sawdust bread was rudimentary. Clean, finely powdered sawdust from untreated wood was mixed with the smallest available portions of flour, water, and sometimes a bit of salt to form a dough. The mixture was then baked over coals or in crude ovens, producing a dense, coarse loaf. Soldiers often joked about its toughness and blandness, but they ate it out of necessity, sometimes softening slices with water or broth to make it more palatable. Despite its unappealing texture and taste, sawdust bread fulfilled its purpose as a calorie source and a ration extender, highlighting the ingenuity and resilience demanded by wartime scarcity. Though it was never considered a delicacy, sawdust bread became part of camp life, representing the extremes of frugality and survival. Letters and diaries occasionally recount the experience with humor or disbelief, illustrating both the harsh realities of army life and the soldier's ability to adapt to them. Today, sawdust bread stands as a stark reminder of the challenges faced by soldiers during the Civil War. It embodies resourcefulness in the face of scarcity, illustrating how necessity drove culinary creativity even when the results were far from appetizing. In every tough, gritty slice, there's a story of endurance, survival, and the unrelenting human drive to make do with what is at hand. Fried salt pork and onion. In the camps of the Civil War, fried salt pork and onion was a modest yet flavorful dish that brought variety and comfort to the otherwise monotonous soldier's diet. Salt pork, heavily cured and often tough, was a primary source of protein, while onions, when available, added a burst of flavor and a hint of freshness. Together, they created a simple meal that could be quickly prepared over a campfire or in a skillet, providing both sustenance and morale in the harsh realities of army life. The preparation was straightforward and practical. Slices of salt pork were cut and fried over hot coals or in an iron skillet until the fat rendered and the edges crisped. Onions were peeled, sliced, and added to the pan, cooking in the pork fat until softened and slightly caramelized. The result was a savory, aromatic mixture with a satisfying richness from the pork fat and a subtle sweetness from the onions. Soldiers often served it over hardtack or bread, or ate it on its own, savoring the combination of textures and flavors that transformed simple ingredients into a more indulgent meal. Fried salt pork and onion was more than just sustenance. It carried emotional resonance. Around the campfire, soldiers would gather to share the meal, swapping portions, comparing cooking techniques, and occasionally joking about the toughness of the pork or the pungency of the onions. Letters home sometimes mention the dish with humor or pride, highlighting its role in creating moments of camaraderie and comfort amid the grueling routines of military life. Today, fried salt pork and onion may seem rustic compared to modern cuisine, yet it exemplifies the resourceful resourcefulness and ingenuity of Civil War soldiers. It nourished both body and spirit, providing warmth, flavor, and a small sense of normalcy. In its simplicity, the dish reminds us that even modest ingredients, when prepared thoughtfully, could offer sustenance, pleasure, and a connection to home in the most challenging of circumstances. Vegetable stew from foraged greens. In the unpredictable and often harsh conditions of Civil War camps, soldiers sometimes had to rely on their surroundings to supplement meager rations. Vegetable stew made from foraged greens was one such improvisation, turning whatever edible plants could be found, wild onions, dandelion leaves, sorrel, or even cabbage, into a nourishing and surprisingly satisfying meal. This stew exemplified the resourcefulness required to survive in a time when supplies were limited and fresh vegetables were rare. It was a dish born not of luxury, but of necessity and ingenuity. The preparation was simple yet practical. Greens were gathered, cleaned, and roughly chopped before being simmered in a pot of water or thin broth. Salt pork, dried meat, or hardtack pieces could be added to provide flavor and protein, while a dash of salt, if available, enhanced the taste. The long simmering process allowed the flavors to meld, softening tough leaves and creating a warm, fragrant stew that was both filling and restorative. Soldiers often experimented with what they could find, learning which plants were edible and how to balance flavors in a surprisingly satisfying way, despite the constraints of camp life. Beyond its nutritional value, vegetable stew from foraged greens held emotional significance. Preparing and sharing it fostered camaraderie, as men exchanged knowledge of edible plants and traded portions with one another. Letters from the front occasionally mention the modest pleasure of a hot, green-rich meal, highlighting the comfort it provided amid the monotony of hardtack and salted meat. Today, this humble stew may seem austere compared to modern vegetables and fresh produce, yet it represents resilience, creativity, and adaptability. In Civil War camps, it nourished both body and morale, transforming meager, foraged ingredients into sustenance and a shared experience. It reminds us that even the simplest foods, sourced with ingenuity, could provide warmth, nourishment, and a small taste of home in difficult times. Cabbage soup. In the austere life of Civil War,
cabbage soup is great for these colder months because it's incredibly nourishing, it's loaded with vegetables, and it just makes you feel good.
In the austere life of Civil War camps, cabbage soup was a simple yet essential dish that offered nourishment, warmth, and a touch of comfort to soldiers enduring long marches and limited rations. Cabbage, being hearty, inexpensive, and easy to store, became a staple ingredient when fresh vegetables were scarce. Combined with water, salt, and occasionally scraps of meat or fat, it produced a modest but sustaining soup that could feed many men from a single pot. Its simplicity made it ideal for army cooks working with limited supplies, yet it carried a surprisingly satisfying warmth and flavor. Preparation was practical and straightforward. Cabbage was chopped coarsely and simmered in water or a thin broth, sometimes along with onions, herbs, or foraged greens to enhance flavor. When available, small portions of salt pork or leftover meat were added, lending richness and protein to the soup. Soldiers learned to improvise using what little they had to make the broth more flavorful or thickening it with crumbled hardtack. The slow simmer over a campfire allowed the flavors to meld, softening the cabbage and creating a hot, aromatic meal that could be eaten immediately or saved for later. Beyond its practical use, cabbage soup carried social and emotional significance. Around the fire, soldiers would gather to share bowls, compare cooking methods, and enjoy the rare moment of comfort and community. Letters from the front occasionally mention the soup with humor or appreciation, highlighting its role in sustaining both body and morale during long campaigns. Today, cabbage soup may seem humble compared to modern meals, yet it exemplifies resourcefulness, resilience, and creativity under constraint. In Civil War camps, it was more than a vegetable broth. It was warmth in a bowl, a source of sustenance, and a reminder that even the simplest, most unassuming ingredients could provide nourishment and a sense of home in challenging times.
I'm gonna show you how to be a stocker. Not this kind of stocker, but this kind of stocker. One that can make amazing chicken stock that'll make you never buy from the store ever again.
In the harsh, unpredictable environment of Civil War camps, beef or chicken broth was a staple that provided both nourishment and comfort to soldiers enduring long marches, exposure, and limited rations. While fresh meat could be scarce or rationed carefully, whenever available, scraps of beef or chicken were simmered slowly with water, salt, and whatever vegetables could be found or foraged, creating a clear, flavorful broth that could sustain men physically and lift spirits in the cold or fatigue of daily camp life. It was a simple dish, but one that carried significance far beyond its basic ingredients. The preparation of broth required patience and resourcefulness. Bones, tough cuts of meat, or leftover pieces were boiled in a pot over a fire, often alongside onions, carrots, or wild greens when accessible. The slow simmering released flavor and nutrients, producing a rich, warming liquid that could be sipped as is or used as a base for soups, stews, or to soften hardtack. Soldiers learned to stretch the broth, adding water or foraged herbs to increase volume while maintaining some nutritional value. This practice highlighted both ingenuity and necessity, turning small amounts of meat into a sustaining resource for multiple meals. Beyond its practical function, broth held emotional resonance. It was often associated with care, warmth, and small comforts of home, a reminder of simmering pots in family kitchens and the simple pleasure of a hot, nourishing drink. Letters from the front occasionally mention the quiet solace found in a steaming cup of broth shared among comrades, fostering moments of camaraderie and reassurance in the midst of hardship. Today, beef or chicken broth may seem ordinary, yet in Civil War camps, it was a lifeline. It nourished bodies, lifted spirits, and provided a versatile foundation for other meals, embodying the resourcefulness, resilience, and ingenuity of soldiers making do with what little they had in extraordinary circumstances. Molasses and cornmeal porridge. In the camps of the Civil War, molasses and cornmeal porridge was a humble yet nourishing dish that provided soldiers with warmth, energy, and a small taste of sweetness in otherwise austere rations. Cornmeal, widely available and inexpensive, formed the base of the porridge, while molasses, a common sweetener in the 19th century, added both calories and fat. Culturally, lobster and jelly reflected the Victorian fascination with novelty, refinement, and technical prowess. Serving such a dish demonstrated access to exotic ingredients, mastery of complex preparation techniques, and a flair for presentation. Guests were expected to appreciate not only the taste, but the artistry of its assembly, the delicate balance of flavors, and the imaginative use of gelatin, which allowed the lobster to be displayed in a dramatic, almost theatrical way. From a modern perspective, lobster and jelly may appear unusual or even intimidating, yet it offers a window into Victorian culinary sensibilities. It embodies a time when dining was as much about visual spectacle, creativity, and social signaling as it was about flavor. The dish celebrates technique, imagination, and the Victorian penchant for transforming luxurious ingredients into memorable, conversation-starting experiences that captivated both eyes and taste buds. Venison with maraschino sauce. Venison with maraschino sauce was a quintessential example of Victorian culinary sophistication, marrying the robust, earthy flavors of game with the sweet, slightly tart elegance of maraschino liqueur. In an era when hunting was both a sport and a social statement, venison represented refinement, status, and a connection to tradition. Victorian chefs were adept at taking such prized ingredients and enhancing them with luxurious accompaniments, demonstrating technical skill while catering to the aristocratic palate. The addition of maraschino sauce added an exotic twist, reflecting the period's fascination with global flavors and the blending of sweet and savory in sophisticated dining. The preparation of this dish required careful attention to both cooking and timing. The venison, typically a loin or haunch, was trimmed and gently roasted or sautéed to preserve its tenderness and rich flavor. Overcooking could render the meat dry and tough, so precision was essential. The maraschino sauce was created by reducing the liqueur with sugar, often accompanied by aromatic elements such as cloves, cinnamon, or a touch of citrus zest. Some chefs added a hint of stock or cream to balance the intensity and produce a silky, glossy finish. Once cooked, the venison was plated elegantly, with the sauce drizzled over or served alongside, creating a striking visual and aromatic contrast that delighted guests. Culturally, venison with maraschino sauce symbolized the Victorian fascination with refinement, technical mastery, and the art of presentation. Serving game elevated with a luxurious, slightly exotic sauce communicated wealth, taste, and access to rare ingredients. Guests at such a meal were invited to savor the interplay of flavors. The deep, meaty richness of venison softened by the bright, subtly sweet complexity of maraschino, and to appreciate the skill involved in achieving perfect harmony. From a modern perspective, the dish may seem unusual due to the pairing of liqueur with game, yet it exemplifies Victorian dining philosophy: innovation, balance, and spectacle. Venison with maraschino sauce reminds us that the era prized creativity, sophistication, and technical skill, transforming familiar ingredients into extraordinary culinary experiences. It captures a moment when flavor, elegance, and audacity converged on the table, offering insight into the artistry and daring spirit of Victorian cuisine. Partridge in puff pastry. Partridge in puff pastry was a hallmark of Victorian opulence, a dish that elevated a familiar game bird into a centerpiece of refinement and culinary artistry. Partridge, prized for its tender, flavorful meat, was a staple at country estates and royal banquets, yet encasing it in buttery puff pastry transformed the dish into a statement of both skill and elegance. The Victorians loved contrasts, the rusticity of game balanced with the sophistication of delicate pastry, and this dish exemplified their flair for combining technique, flavor, and visual drama. The preparation demanded precision and care. The partridge was first cleaned and seasoned, often with a combination of salt, pepper, and aromatic herbs such as thyme, rosemary, or sage. Some chefs added a layer of forcemeat or finely chopped mushrooms inside the cavity, enhancing flavor and moisture. The bird was then carefully wrapped in sheets of puff pastry, which had to be rolled thin enough to bake evenly, yet strong enough to contain the partridge and any stuffing. Egg wash gave the pastry a golden sheen, while careful scoring allowed steam to escape, ensuring a crisp, flaky crust. The assembled bird was baked slowly to cook the meat through without drying it, the pastry puffing and browning to perfection, creating an elegant package that promised both flavor and spectacle. Culturally, partridge and puff pastry reflected the Victorian fascination with grandeur, precision, and the artistry of dining. Serving a whole bird in pastry was a display of culinary skill and sophistication, signaling access to quality ingredients and mastery of complex preparation techniques. Guests were encouraged to admire the presentation, inhale the aromatic herbs and baked crust, and savor the tender meat encased in its golden shell. The dish exemplified the Victorian approach to dining, where elegance and creativity were as important as flavor, and where the table served as a stage for technical prowess and refined taste. From a modern perspective, partridge and puff pastry may seem elaborate, yet it offers insight into Victorian dining values, artistry, patience, and the elevation of simple ingredients into extraordinary experiences. It reminds us that the era prized drama, balance, and technique, transforming a humble game bird into a dish that delighted both eyes and palate. Partridge and puff pastry endures as a testament to the Victorian love of flavor, presentation, and culinary ingenuity. Capon with almonds and saffron. Capon with almonds and saffron was a dish that perfectly captured the elegance and extravagance of Victorian dining, a celebration of rich flavors, careful technique, and visual spectacle. Capon, a castrated rooster known for its tender, flavorful meat, was prized in aristocratic kitchens for its ability to absorb seasonings and maintain moisture during long cooking. When paired with the delicate nuttiness of almonds and the golden, aromatic luxury of saffron, the dish became a symbol of refinement, culinary artistry, and global influence, embodying the era's fascination with both exotic ingredients and lavish presentation. The preparation was meticulous. The capon was first cleaned, trussed, and lightly seasoned with salt, pepper, and perhaps a touch of herbs such as thyme or marjoram. Some recipes called for the bird to be lightly seared to lock in juices before roasting or braising. Meanwhile, almonds were blanched, toasted, and sometimes ground or incorporated into a rich sauce, while saffron strands were steeped in warm stock or cream to release their distinctive color and aroma. The bird was then cooked slowly, ensuring tender, juicy meat, and often finished with the saffron-infused sauce poured over the capon and a garnish of whole or sliced almonds. The combination of golden hues, nutty textures, and aromatic richness created a feast for both the eyes and palate, elevating the humble poultry into a dish worthy of the grandest Victorian table. Culturally, capon with almonds and saffron reflected the Victorian fascination with luxury, refinement, and global trade. Serving such a dish demonstrated access to rare and imported ingredients, as well as mastery of technique and presentation. Guests were invited to admire the visual appeal, inhale the intoxicating aroma, and savor the layers of flavor that balanced richness, nuttiness, and subtle spice. The dish showcased the era's appreciation for culinary theater, where each course was designed to impress and delight. From a modern perspective, capon with almonds and saffron may seem elaborate or exotic, yet it exemplifies the Victorian approach to cooking, elevating quality ingredients through careful technique, thoughtful seasoning, and artistry in presentation. It reminds us that Victorian cuisine celebrated creativity, opulence, and sensory experience, transforming a simple bird into a dish that embodied both sophistication and indulgence, offering a taste of history with every bite. Crayfish salad in aspic. Crayfish salad in aspic was a quintessential Victorian dish that combined technical skill, visual artistry, and the era's fascination with the exotic. Crayfish, with their delicate, sweet flesh, were considered a luxurious ingredient, ideal for showcasing the chef's mastery over both flavor and presentation. Encasing them in aspic, a clear, savory jelly, allowed the Victorian kitchen to transform a simple seafood salad into a dramatic, eye-catching centerpiece, demonstrating both refinement and ingenuity. The dish was as much about spectacle as taste, reflecting a dining culture that prized elegance, novelty, and culinary precision. The preparation was meticulous. Fresh crayfish were first poached until tender, then peeled and carefully arranged with a selection of complementary ingredients, often including lightly cooked vegetables, herbs, or sometimes delicate slices of cold meats or eggs. The aspic was made from a rich stock, usually derived from crustacean shells simmered with aromatic vegetables and herbs and clarified to produce a perfectly clear, flavorful jelly. Gelatin, naturally present in the stock or added separately, provided the necessary structure to set the mixture. The crayfish and accompanying ingredients were placed in molds, and the hot aspic poured over them to encase each element precisely. Once chilled and set, the salad emerged as a jewel-like creation, the crayfish appearing suspended in a glistening, translucent medium that highlighted both texture and color. Culturally, crayfish salad in aspic exemplified the Victorian fascination with luxury, technical mastery, and dining as performance. Serving this dish signaled access to exotic seafood, refined taste, and a command of culinary technique that required patience, precision, and artistry. Guests were invited not only to savor the tender, subtly flavored crayfish, but also to admire the intricate arrangement and the visual clarity of the aspic, which allowed each ingredient to shine. From a modern perspective, crayfish salad in aspic may seem unusual or even intimidating, yet it offers a window into Victorian dining sensibilities. It illustrates a period when presentation was as important as flavor, when chefs transformed everyday ingredients into theatrical experiences, and when dining was an immersive sensory journey. The dish stands as a testament to Victorian creativity, skill, and the enduring appeal of transforming simple seafood into something extraordinary, elegant, and unforgettable. Stuffed rabbit with currants. Stuffed rabbit with currants was a quintessential Victorian dish that combined rustic ingredients with refined culinary technique, transforming a modest animal into a centerpiece worthy of a grand dining table. Rabbit, prized for its tender, lean meat, was both both economical and versatile, often featured in country estates and urban kitchens alike. Victorian chefs, known for their ingenuity and flair, elevated this simple protein by pairing it with sweet, jewel-like currants, creating a dish that balanced savory, earthy flavors with a hint of delicate sweetness. The combination reflected the era's fascination with contrasts, rich versus light, rustic versus refined, and its penchant for turning humble ingredients into elegant fare. The preparation of stuffed rabbit with currants required both care and patience. The rabbit was first cleaned, skinned, and trimmed, with careful attention paid to maintaining the integrity of the meat. A stuffing was then prepared, often combining currants with breadcrumbs, onions, herbs such as thyme or sage, and sometimes a touch of butter or cream to bind the mixture and add richness. The stuffing was packed gently inside the rabbit, which was then sewn or trussed to hold its shape during cooking. The meat was roasted or braised slowly, allowing the flavors to meld while ensuring the rabbit remained moist and tender. During cooking, the currants released their natural sweetness, infusing the meat with subtle complexity, while any accompanying sauce or glaze added a glossy finish and additional depth. Culturally, stuffed rabbit with currants reflected the Victorian appreciation for resourcefulness, artistry, and balance. The dish demonstrated a cook's ability to elevate a common ingredient, showcasing technique, flavor layering, and visual appeal. Guests were invited to savor the tender meat alongside the sweet pop of currants, appreciating the interplay of flavors and textures, as well as the elegance of the presentation. From a modern perspective, stuffed rabbit with currants may seem quaint or unusual, yet it offers a window into Victorian dining sensibilities, creativity, attention to detail, and a desire to transform the ordinary into something extraordinary. The dish exemplifies the era's dedication to culinary craftsmanship, the harmonious blending of flavors, and the joy of turning even modest ingredients into memorable celebratory experiences on the table. Fruit-filled mince pies, non-traditional. Fruit-filled mince pies, in their non-traditional Victorian iterations, were a striking departure from the familiar spiced meat-based versions, reflecting the era's experimentation with flavor, texture, and seasonal produce. While mince pies originally combined minced meats with dried fruits and spices, the growing Victorian fascination with sweet confections, imported fruits, and refined desserts led inventive chefs to create versions entirely filled with fruit. These pies celebrated the natural sweetness of berries, apples, currants, and preserved citrus, often enhanced with sugar, wine, or aromatic spices, offering a festive and visually appealing alternative to their more savory counterparts. The preparation of non-traditional mince pies was both meticulous and creative. The fruit filling was carefully selected, cleaned, chopped, and sometimes macerated with sugar, wine, or liqueur to intensify flavor and aroma. Spices like cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, or ginger were added sparingly to complement rather than overpower the natural sweetness. A rich, flaky pastry encased the fruit, rolled thin to achieve a tender, crisp shell that contrasted beautifully with the soft, juicy filling. Each pie was molded or cut into small, uniform shapes, and often decorated with pastry cutouts or lattices to showcase the vibrant fruit within. Baking required precision, as the pies needed to be cooked long enough to meld flavors and set the filling while maintaining a delicate golden crust. Culturally, fruit-filled mince pies demonstrated Victorian creativity, refinement, and the joy of celebrating the season's bounty. These pies were popular at festive gatherings, tea parties, and family celebrations, offering both indulgence and artistry. They reflected the period's embrace of imported fruits, new preservation techniques, and the desire to elevate simple ingredients into visually appealing, flavorful desserts. Guests admired not only the taste, but the craftsmanship, the harmonious blending of textures, and the inventive approach that transformed a traditional dish into something novel and memorable. From a modern perspective, non-traditional fruit-filled mince pies may seem whimsical or even avant-garde, yet they offer insight into Victorian culinary sensibilities. The pies highlight an era when experimentation, elegance, and sensory delight were paramount, and when cooks transformed humble, seasonal ingredients into exquisite creations. rations. They remind us that Victorian dining prized artistry, creativity, and the pleasure of elevating familiar dishes into extraordinary, celebratory experiences for both the eyes and palate. Foie gras with Madeira reduction. Foie gras with Madeira reduction epitomizes the opulence and refinement of Victorian haute cuisine, a dish that showcased both luxurious ingredients and the technical skill of the chef. Foie gras, the delicately fattened liver of a goose or duck, was prized for its rich, buttery, free texture and subtle, earthy flavor. In Victorian England, it symbolized wealth, sophistication, and access to rare and exotic foods, making it a favorite for aristocratic banquets and formal dinners. Pairing it with a Madeira reduction, a sweet, fortified wine sauce, added complexity, enhancing the liver's richness while introducing a vibrant, slightly tangy contrast that delighted both the palate and the eye. The preparation required careful attention and precise technique. The foie gras was typically cleaned, deveined, and sometimes lightly poached or seared to develop a delicate crust while preserving its creamy interior. The Madeira reduction was prepared separately, slowly simmering the wine with sugar and aromatics such as shallots, herbs, or a touch of spice until it thickened into a glossy, flavorful glaze. Some chefs incorporated a hint of stock or vinegar to balance the sweetness and deepen the sauce's flavor profile. When plated, the foie gras was often accompanied by the reduction drizzled artfully over the top, sometimes garnished with delicate fruits or toasted nuts to add both color and texture. The dish was as much a visual statement as a culinary one, presenting richness and elegance in every bite. Culturally, foie gras with Madeira reduction reflected the Victorian fascination with luxury, global ingredients, and sophisticated dining techniques. Serving this dish signaled access to rare resources, mastery of intricate preparation, and the ability to elevate a single ingredient into a complex, memorable experience. Guests were encouraged to savor the silky, indulgent texture of the foie gras alongside the sweet, nuanced sauce, appreciating both flavor and presentation. From a modern perspective, foie gras with Madeira reduction may seem decadent or controversial, yet it offers insight into Victorian dining philosophy, a celebration of artistry, indulgence, and technique. The dish illustrates how chefs transformed premium ingredients into works of culinary theater, creating an immersive experience that engaged multiple senses. It remains a symbol of the era's taste for sophistication, indulgence, and the extraordinary pleasures of the table. That wraps up our journey through 30 of the most shocking and extravagant foods ever enjoyed by Victorian royalty. If you enjoyed this peek into the opulent, eccentric world of Victorian dining, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating explorations of history on the plate. And we'd love to hear from you. What's the most surprising dish you dare to try?